Joining me right now is Indiana Senator Dan Coats. Senator, thank you very much for joining us. What's your take on this?
Well, I do think George Mitchell is right in terms of we don't exactly know what happened. The FBI is digging into this. We'll be talking about this in the Intelligence Committee today. We've been concerned, very concerned, with the prospects of lone wolves, those that are self-radicalized, those that are getting on social media, linking to ISIS, linking to encrypted sites, watching Homeland and saying, you know, maybe I want to get involved in something like that. So this has become a major issue for us in terms of protecting the American people and keeping us safe. And it becomes ever harder if people self-radicalize. They're looking at social media in terms of how to build a bomb or how to acquire a weapon. They're arming themselves and they're doing these kinds of things. And so it's an enormous issue. It's the world we live in right now. It's just a culture of violence that's sweeping across the world, and I think it's very unsettling.
Senator, we've got Steve Rogers here, who I want to get into the conversation. He's a former FBI National Joint Terrorism Task Force member. But let me get your take on something that keeps coming up this morning with all of our guests, from George Mitchell to Jim Kallstrom at the FBI as well. And that is the metadata program, the NSA, the handcuffing that the U.S. lawmakers have seen or been faced with in terms of tracking terrorism because of this encryption of technology. We can't even track them on the phone, can we?
We have compromised our intelligence capabilities severely, I think. I've worked and fought against this and came up short. A number of us were pleading with our colleagues here not to go the route of, oh, they're listening to all your phone calls. That wasn't true at all. That was a false proposition made by some members irresponsibly. This is a major issue here. We need every tool that we can in order to determine who's out there trying to either organize or trying to radicalize themselves. And we need all the tools that we can. We want to and we will respect the privacy of Americans, but we have given up on tools, and I think we have to take a new look at how we try to prevent these things from happening before they happen.
Steve Rogers.
Senator, there is a tool we need as a former police officer and speaking with police officers all over the country. We need our leaders to send a signal to the local cop that you're backing us, you're watching our back, you're giving us the ability to do our job. We have not heard that. We have not. All we've heard is criticisms from Washington, people jumping on the bandwagon against police. It's, you know, in order to secure this country, we need our local cops. So my plea to you is, do whatever you could to let those men and women in blue know that our government has their back.
Do you have their back?
Well, yes, we do have their back. There may be some that are, for political reasons, joining with those protesters who are simply saying, way overselling the problem here, causing law enforcement people to basically stand down because they're so afraid of walking into a situation that's going to end up in a situation where they become the perpetrators of the crime and not those who are actually committing the crime. There is a balance here that does need to be achieved, but we need to work and bring our communities together with our law enforcement officials. And I think everyone in Congress ought to support that. There will be mistakes along the way. Those people need to be that has to be adjudicated. They need to take responsibility for that. But we need a coordination of law enforcement together to deal with some of these, together communities to deal with some of these problems that we're seeing spreading across the United States.
Senator, the law enforcement, yes. How about education? You mentioned Homeland. Again, it won a Golden Globe for a reason, for one of the best. I guess it won the Golden Globe in 2011, 2012 for best television series. I've spent the morning learning that parts of that television series are actually true. How do you find a balance with that in educating people that this could be happening in their neighborhoods?
Well, we're not going to shut down Homeland. We don't want to censor here in Washington deciding what people can watch. I've watched those shows with great interest. But I think what they're depicting in that is that we have a serious problem here in the world through this radicalization that is taking place through whether it's ISIS and ISIL that is motivating through social media, whether it is others who are just copycatting what's going on here in these mass shootings. I think it's something that there's no silver bullet that's going to solve this problem, but we as a culture, we as a community of people need to start thinking about ways that we can, number one, provide security and protection for our people, and number two, be responsible citizens. And this is not an easy task ahead of us, given the culture that we're facing right now.
Senator, we want to move on to economic issues before getting back to the Intelligence Committee, but markets this morning are getting impacted. Mario Draghi is speaking live right now from the European Central Bank, saying he's extending asset purchases to at least March of 2015, and that the economic recovery in Europe has been dampened. We know that Federal Reserve Chairman Janet Yellen is set to speak before the Joint Economic Committee, which you chair. What do you expect to hear from Janet Yellen this morning?
Well, I expect to hear that things that she has already said publicly, and that is that we are moving in a positive direction in terms of interest rates, in terms of the economy, unemployment. We do have to contrast that, though, with what's happening in Europe and what's happening in China and other parts of the world. It seems that they're moving into negative territory. We're moving into positive territory. That affects our currency rates, and obviously these are some of the questions that will be posed to her this morning. I will be posing them if my colleagues won't be. But it's pretty clear that the signals are out there for the beginning of the launch of interest rates. And I want to ask the question of how does this contrast with the going into negative territory on some of our major trading partners and global partners around the world? How does this affect the U.S. economy, not just right now in the next 3 months or so, but going forward?
Do you expect the U.S. to go into recession next year, Senator?
Oh, I wouldn't say that, and I don't think Chair Yellen will say that. We've made some very positive moves here in the United States, but I do want to know what the global impact is going to be. It is a percentage of the total economy here in the United States,
right.
Not a majority percentage, but I'm very interested in what her responses will be to this.
All right, and Senator, final question here on the mass shooting in California. What specific intelligence are you looking for to learn to find out more about motives and about what went on here in terms of the two suspects? What intelligence do you need now?
Well, we need a thorough scrubbing of everything, whatever communications they perhaps have had, what's maybe in their hard drive. The FBI will be going through all of this. Who have they contacted? What has their lifestyle been? Who have they? What about this trip to Saudi Arabia? Who did he best talk with? Where did he go? All this has to be collected, I think, before we can come to a final conclusion. But we've got to scrub this thing thoroughly. And once again, our law enforcement people, the FBI, they're just almost overwhelmed now with the number of threats that exist out here. We do need resources to address this.
All right, we will leave it there. Senator, thanks very much for your time this morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Senator Dan Coates joining us there.